I'm here with Suzanne Jabour, who is a grief educator and coach. And we're going to talk about what grief looks like as we move forward through our lives. So, welcome, Suzanne. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Great. So, first, we'll just start off with your own loss story.
Sure. So I came to be a grief educator and coach after the death of my son, Ben. He was 22 when he died in September of 2020. So, as you can imagine, and you can imagine, right? It's absolutely as horrible as you think it's going to be. And I'm so grateful that I had done a lot of work on myself. I had done a lot of work around, self-actualization and knowing myself really well and all of those kinds of things, as much as you can in our continual, peeling away of the onion. And, so I felt like I at least had some tools to navigate the grief with. And at the same time, it was unlike any grief I had dealt with before
Mm.
or experienced before. My dad died when I was in my 30s and my mom in my 40s. So it wasn't my first loss experience of someone really close to me, but there's something about the loss of a child that's just different. And I think it does have to do with that sense of, who you are and how your life is supposed to go. Even though both my parents died far earlier than I, would have wanted them to, we grow up knowing that, or, knowing as much as we can know anything, right? That our parents are supposed to die before we do. But the same way that we carry that sort of weird knowing, we know that our children aren't supposed to. And, you and your audience know that that's not the case, that it does happen, that children, die before their parents. And it is a unique loss because it is, for me, more than when my parents died, it was a real loss of myself as well. So the secondary losses pile on in a different way than they did for me with other deaths that I'd faced.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, a couple of things I loved what you said about we have this idea, right? Like this is
Mm.
how things go and this is the order that they go in and that's if it goes that way then you've had a great life. Which I mean, life is not. There's no promises as we all know. All of us sitting here know that. And whether you had your son for 22 years or never actually met them alive, that loss still sticks with you. It's still fundamental in how you live out the rest of your life. So,
Yeah.
I heard a saying one time, it was, "If you lose a parent, you lose your past. If
Mhm.
you lose a sibling, you lose your present, and if you lose a child, you lose your future."
Yeah. Like, in a weird way, this is supposed to be our legacy, right? Like, we have these weird, like, when you start to break down the way we think about these things, they're nonsensical, right? These
Mm.
constructs that we exist in are fundamentally nonsensical. Like, Ben was not brought to this earth to be my legacy. That was not his purpose. It's not my purpose as the daughter of my parents. But we do have that sort of weird sense that like they're going to carry on the family name, which Ben was, adamantly was never going to have children, right? That was not part of his path. But we have these weird stories that we tell ourselves. And then when that person is gone, as you say, whether it's, before you've gotten the chance to know them or after, it upends all of those stories we've been told, and we have to build something real and build something new for ourselves,
Yeah.
and then hope that other people will buy in with us because you're also then challenging everybody else's story. And I
Mm.
think that's part of why people step away and part of why we end up a little bit isolated. I know for me, for so many of my friends and acquaintances and even colleagues, it just hit too close to home. Like it was too close that it could be their story and it could upend their story. And, if this could happen to me, maybe it could happen to them, all the same things that happen with, you and your listeners around stillbirth and pregnancy loss. Like there's something about that loss of a child that just strikes people and they can't show up the way that they might be able to for other losses. And that was really, hurtful, massively hurtful,
Yeah.
right? When your people all scatter. And
Mhm.
it also was really so fascinating to me, on the other hand, to sort of think, well, but why is that? Like, why does this hit in a different way? Like, I lost my parents long before many of my friends, had their parents die, and many of my friends still have their parents, right? But somehow that didn't disrupt so much. But something about the loss of a child, it's terrifying.
Yeah. And what it reminds me so much too of what you hear from cancer patients.
Yeah.
That isolation, because it's kind of like, almost like it's catchy, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
ooh, yeah, wait a minute, that just got real. That just got real for me. Like that could actually happen to me.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm assuming that you share a similar experience, but when people say, "Oh, you lost your son, I can't imagine that." Yes, they can. Yes,
Yeah.
they can imagine it, and that's what scares the heck out of them.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. I heard, and in the early grief days, your brain is just made of mashed potatoes and soup. Like there's nothing. But I heard someone say, no idea who, and I'll never probably figure it out, in those very early days, that the people who say to you, I can't imagine, are actually the people who can, but won't let themselves.
Yeah.
And that was so helpful for me to just be able to hear that a different way. Cause sometimes that I can't imagine is really hurtful. Cause
Mm.
it's like, if you can't imagine, then how isolated am I? How weird am I? How abnormal am I? Like, you can't even imagine? Really? Like, it's one of those things so frustrating for me to be like, really? I can imagine pretty much anything. So it wasn't that they couldn't, it's that they knew they could, but they couldn't let themselves. And there was something about that really liberated me from that story I was making up about, being all mad about it, which of course doesn't help anybody.
No,
Uh, but I thought, oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I can't imagine really means I can, but I'll be darned if I'm gonna.
but I won't go there.
Nope, can't do
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think this is a great introduction to what are the things that you love to educate people on about grief and what to say and what not to say?
So I love educating people about anything about grief. Because, really for me, the sense of normalizing grief and having people just understand that this is a part of our life, it's a healthy response to tragic, terrible things that happen. And it's something we all do all the time for losses, big and small, right? We feel grief for small losses too. And so if everything I can do to normalize that, that's really become, my cathedral project, like that thing that's not going to be accomplished in your lifetime. That's what I'm here to push along, as far as I can push it and pass the torch. And I really, really, that in any grief forum or place people are talking about grief, there's this kind of accepted notion that grief will change your address book. And that's 100% what I experienced. People I thought, that had been in my life since before Ben was born, like for 20 plus years, disappeared.
Mm.
And other people showed up, and I thought, but why is that? And why do we accept it? Like, why is that the norm? Is that grief will change your address book? So that's really somewhere where I spent a lot of time in curiosity, in conversation, in my reading. And what appears to be the universal reason that happens is fear. People are so scared that they're going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing that they get all tangled up in fear, and then they can't do anything. And then time passes, and then it's even more awkward to show up. And now you weren't with me for me in the worst moment of my life and the worst, as you know, months and now years of my life. So now what does that mean? And what happens to our relationship? So it's that fear piece that changes our address books. It's not people's intention. It's not people's love for you. And I think sometimes the people who care the most about not doing harm are the most scared. So I love to talk to people about the mindsets you can have, the shifts you can make in the way that you're thinking about it, and really some basic skills. I always try and have a little bit of lightness around this topic because it can be so difficult. So my light version of that is, if you heard your Aunt Mildred say it to your mom at your grandma's funeral, you should probably not say it.
Oh my gosh. That is the best advice ever. Yes. I
Like,
love it.
and we all know that. I think that's what's so interesting in this moment is, we all have that sense that all those cliches and platitudes we've heard before, they don't serve. Like they feel awkward in our body, and we don't want, like, when they come out of our mouths, we kind of go, oh, that's not quite, right. But we don't have anything to replace them with. So then we get all tongue tied and stammery, and then we don't say anything because we feel stupid. Right. So if we can break that apart and just accept that, in an era, I think those sayings all came out of like the 40s and 50s, where our culture was very homogenous.
Yeah.
We were big time pretending, right? We were
Yeah.
all living the leave it to beaver cleaver life on the outside, which had nothing to do with what was really happening. And now, we're not doing that anymore. So that kind of, they're in a better place. This too shall pass. It will make you stronger. All that baloney. We kind of know in our body that it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
I really wish I had the perfect phrase and I could say, every time someone has a loss, you could go and say, get it, but there isn't one.
No.
There
No.
just isn't one. And so what I really work with people to do is to just embrace the messiness. Like, some of the best things people said to me were things like, I have no idea what to say.
I
I don't
agree. Yes.
And I don't know how this works. And no matter what it is, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And then
Um,
they stuck it out. Like, my core team of amazing individuals who stuck with me, this now 2.5+ years, that's how most of them started out, with that kind of, vulnerability and honesty. And there's just no pretending, because none of us know how to do this. We don't talk about it enough.
no.
Have any sense as the person who's grieving or the person showing up for them. We don't know how to do it. And we don't know what's going to happen. And we don't know what the path might be. And even though we've done it before, like, I had grieved my dad and grieved my mom, and grieving my son was entirely different than that.
Very different.
So
Yeah.
it just requires of us that open-hearted vulnerability, honesty, own what's real. I also think it's okay to say to someone, this is absolutely terrible.
That is my advice. Yes. I mean,
This is
if
terrible.
there's ever advice for what to say to someone who's grieving, it's like, I hate that you're going through this.
Yeah.
This sucks. This is
Yeah.
terrible.
Like, I'm trying to use very PC language for, very G-rated
Yeah.
language for singing in the car with their kids. But all
Yeah.
those expletives that you feel in your body, say them out loud.
Yeah.
Because the
That's
griever feels that too. And,
that's what the griever needs to hear. Yes.
yeah, it feels like the only universal thing about grieving is that it needs to be witnessed.
Mm.
Everybody needs to be seen, right? So some version of, I see you. This is terrible. I love what you said. I'm so mad this is happening to you.
Yeah.
I'm so angry you're going through this. Like, and I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you. I don't know how to show up. I don't know, whatever it is you don't know, put that on the table too.
Say it. Yeah.
Just say it. Like, if we could all stop pretending and show up as our real, brilliant, imperfect selves, that's how we need to show up for each other. That's how we need to show up for ourselves. That kind of stuff would change the world. And grief is this weird place where it's perfect to practice it all,
Yeah.
because none of us know. We're all
Me
making it up as we go along, right? You find the resources, you talk to other people that are able to talk about it, which is very few people in your life. Hopefully you find your way to an amazing podcast like yours where it's just a topic we talk about because it's reality. We need to figure this out together.
Yeah. I do think it is just something that if we would stop trying to fix people,
Yes.
like, I'm gonna say the thing that's gonna make them feel better. Or I'm not gonna mention that they had this happen in their life because I don't want them to feel bad again. Like,
Yeah.
if we would just kind of quit assuming that whatever we're gonna say is going to be the magic fixing bullet for the griever,
Yeah.
I think
That's how we're all brought up, right? You're
we
supposed to figure
are.
out the problem.
Yeah.
You're supposed to make a plan. You're supposed to execute the plan and fix the problem, right? I was an A+ student at that. I
Yeah.
will show up. I will fix you, right? Ridiculousness, because none of us can fix each other. We can all just be on this wacky journey together. But that sense of wanting to fix it, that's really can be hurtful.
Yeah.
And that you're absolutely right too. That people somehow have this idea that they're going to remind the griever as time goes on. They don't want to mention it because they don't want to remind. So the other thing I would tell you is your griever remembers.
Mhm.
They will never forget. And the fact that you also remember is of immense comfort.
Yes.
It's of immense comfort. So, put that day in your calendar with a repeat every year, with a reminder a week ahead of time. So you can fire them a text and say, "Oh, I know you're coming up against a hard time. I'm thinking of you."
Oh my gosh.
Whatever it is, like there's very simple things we can do to connect with each other. That connection is everything. As long as it's real and honest and, because your platitudes are never going to connect you. And I was laughing. I was talking with some friends the other night and one of them was saying, "I can't believe you talk about casseroles." And I'm like, okay, let's be real. I hate to break it to you. Nobody wants your casserole. They just don't want you. If you want to help someone eat, ask them for a recipe or two that you could cook for them. Nobody wants your casserole in their freezer. And then you feel so badly. I've never thrown away so much food in my entire life. But I was like, we're barely eating because our rule was if we didn't feel nauseous and we felt hungry at the same time, we would try and eat something.
Yeah.
That didn't happen very often. So your free 2,000 casseroles that are it was not helpful.
That's
But
funny.
that's
Yeah.
kind of, think about in the 50s, that was the sign of a good household, right? You had all
That's what
this
they
stuff.
did.
You were going to get down to a proper meal, all that kind of stuff. So that's another one of those things that kind of comes from the past and no longer really serves us all that well. We know you want to help. We know you want to do something. We all would, it's so much easier to do than to bear witness. Really, we need you to bear witness.
Something just struck me when you were talking too. Like, I think right now we're very conscious of our language and how we talk to people and about people and treat people. But here is this huge experience that we all experience at some point with someone in our lives. And here we are. We're still back. Like, we're way, way back in the primitive way of
Right.
thinking about things. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
This
I
is
think, where I've put a lot of attention and really tried to make connections is this sense of isolation that comes with grief and the loneliness.
yeah.
And, there's this epidemic of loneliness right now, right? That was happening before COVID and then was exacerbated by all the things that happened around COVID, which, is, you can think whatever you want to think about them. They happened. We need to acknowledge it. We need to grieve it. We need
Happens.
to
Yeah.
process it. But we're facing this vast isolation and the sense of loneliness. And we all in this moment right now, I mean, we're recording this in March of 2023. Everybody is grieving something.
Mm.
Everybody, whether you lost a person or a graduation or a dance recital or a wedding, or you couldn't go to a funeral or a vacation or a concert, or you're passionate about museums, whatever it was, we have all lost so much in this past 3 years. There is a rich, ripe moment for us to connect in this grief and show up for each other and disrupt that whole paradigm. And we're all terrified to do it. right? Because it's grief, and grief is scary, and we don't like it, and we don't want to catch it. But it's happening for all of us right now. And that makes me so worried about the way we're setting ourselves up for whatever is next. So if you call that getting back to normal, which I think is it's a myth. There's no such thing as, first of all, there's no such thing as normal. There's no normal to get back to.
We
We
don't.
need to move onward, right? Onward with our losses. But as we're rebuilding whatever comes next, if we did it connected and hearing each other and being vulnerable and being honest, like we could change the world.
Yeah, truly, we could. What do you think is the responsibility of the griever when they hear things that really just grind them the wrong way? And it's probably coming from a good intention, but you get because you're so tender anyways, and then here they're coming in and they are so insensitive to how I'm feeling. What do you think about that?
I think it's a lot to ask of the griever, especially in those early days, like in that acute phase where it's just all you can think of and you're just trying to survive. I don't think it's the griever's job to fix that. As time passes and you're more equipped to talk, I think it's lovely if you can just sort of say, I know that that is coming from, the best of intentions, or that you mean well, or I mean, here comes the cliches, right? Because I don't know how to start that conversation. I mean, I've said to people, I'm just going to put my grief educator hat on and we're going to have a grief educator moment. And then we can get back to our conversation as, co-humans. I think it's a lot to ask of grievers, especially in those early days. And I think it's great if bystanders can do it. If you see someone say something and you see the person kind of contract and it landed wrong, maybe you could go and say to that person, oh, yeah. And the person who said it knows too, for the most part. Most of us are not so unaware of the way we impact the world that we wouldn't notice that someone kind of went, or, whatever it was, or person in tears, right? For me, in those early days, if someone said the wrong thing, I was just a hot mess. I would just be boohooing, which was for me how I had to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot to ask of the griever in those early days. I think it's something that we can learn proactively, which is where I spend a lot of energy, is like, let's have this conversation now. Before you get the call that your best friend lost somebody and you have to show up for them, think about it ahead of time. Like, what would you like to hear? What would you like to say? Practice it. Practice it with the little losses. Like, if we could practice how to show up for each other with a loss that feels relatively small, then we're building that capacity and we're building that muscle and we're experimenting with words. I mean, I've read things where people are like, as a griever, you should just say to them, that's not the thing to say anymore. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, Nelly, like, that's a lot to ask of someone who can barely get through the day. Like,
Yeah.
those days where showering is a momentous accomplishment, I am not here to educate you. I am here to survive.
Yes, 100%. And at that point, you're just in survival mode. Yeah. You can't,
Yeah.
and you're
I don't
protecting your heart as much as you can, even though those daggers are going in.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I'm doing really brilliantly in that moment to not punch you in the throat. So to expect me to not punch you in the throat and politely educate you, it's too much. It's too much to ask.
Yeah.
I am protecting myself from either bursting into tears in a place that it would not be welcome, saying something I'll regret later, punching you in the throat. Like, it's too much to ask. I think we need to do that work up front. We need to be having these conversations around the kitchen table, or, in our friend circles, and saying, oh my gosh, like, I know that everybody's facing it right now and we're all in this together. And like, how can we talk about it?
Yes.
How can we break down this fear that we all feel? Like, we're all terrified to say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So how do we start to break that apart before one of us is in it in a big way? And we all want to be able to show up.
Yeah.
What if you had that conversation ahead of time? Like, why are we waiting till we're in crisis to have a conversation? There's nothing else we do that way.
You're right, and those are the worst times. Those are the worst
Yeah.
times to bring up, all of your husband's laundry that lays on the
Right.
floors when you're in the middle of an argument.
Right.
It kind of feels like that same negativity.
Yeah. And it's so, I mean, it's one of the few things in life that is going to happen to all of us. We're all going to face grief and we're all going to feel losses and feel grief, but we don't get taught how to do it. We don't get taught how to support each other. Like anything else that's a guarantee in our life, like I got taught how to drive a car. I got taught how to cook. I got taught how to clean the house. I didn't get taught how to show up for someone who's that tender and needs that level of compassion and gentleness. I didn't get taught that.
No, but we get to do that now. We get to
Yeah.
do that with our children now, or with our sisters and our friends or whoever now.
Yeah. And it's such a ripe time for it, right? Everybody has
Mhm.
lost something. Everybody, no matter who you are, everybody's lost something. And so, what if we wrote all those things down and just went, oh man, like no wonder. And this is the other thing that's so fascinating to me. So many people right now are feeling the symptoms of grief.
Yeah.
When you're feeling brain fog, you're feeling exhausted, you're feeling like everything, you're only paddling upstream, right? Everything is hard. So many people are having so many people are having digestive problems right now, which is for so many of us stress related, right?
Yes.
We're under intense stress. Like a lot of that is grief, but we're not addressing that piece of it because we don't want it to be, right?
Right.
We
No.
don't want to go to that scary place that we don't know about. So we're pretending it's whatever we're pretending it is. But a lot of it right now is grief. So what if you sat down with a group of friends or family and said, I just was thinking the other day of all the things that have happened or not happened in the last 3 years. Like people are talking about those last 3 years again, because it's, the time of the year when most of us, COVID really started to impact our lives. Like, what if you sat down and made a list? Oh yeah, remember we had this big party plan and we had to cancel. Like right at the beginning, we all had stuff planned for those next few weeks that got canceled. Remember we had these tickets, we had this trip, we lost this person,
Yeah.
right? We lost a job, we lost a business, we lost an opportunity, we lost our sense of how the world works.
Yeah. It's a normal
And
part of life.
yeah, and we all did it together. So if we can
Mhm.
talk about how it happened to all of us, sometimes that's an opening too, because then you're not isolated. It's not just about me, that woman who lost her son.
Yeah.
It's about all of us who lost so much and now get to pick, how do we carry that with us? How do we come back differently? How do we come back using everything we've learned?
Mhm. Yeah, we
How
just
do we carry it with us? There's no getting over it or through it or past it or all those stupid sayings. There's only moving on with, right? There's only integration for me. That's my perspective. That's
I think,
my,
yeah, and I think too, choosing in every scenario, right? In your life, you get the choice. You are at choice to choose something that feels better, or
yeah,
to stay regretful, resentful, angry.
yeah. And I'm not here to tell you that choosing is easy.
Mm-mm.
Any of us wished for an opportunity to get to do that, right? It is absolutely difficult and it's hard and it hurts and we have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
For me, I just was so clear that, this terrible thing happened in my life, happened to my son, happened to me, happened to my daughter, happened to his friends and family. I will not live a life where this terrible thing happened for nothing.
Mm, yes,
I just refuse.
I agree.
That's
Yeah.
not to say it happened for a reason or any of those.
Didn't have right.
I didn't need this to happen to get more character.
You're never gonna say that you're glad you got to experience this.
Never would I choose this over having been back. Never.
Never. No one would. No.
And it happened.
Mhm.
And I had to choose how to carry on and how to build a life that doesn't have him here, but that he's still a part of.
Yeah.
He's never not going to be part of my life.
Yeah.
So how do I build how do I build a life where I carry that with me the same way I carry my dad. And I hear his voice all the, something happened. I think, oh, what would dad think of that? Or my mom or other people I've lost. Like you carry them with you.
Yeah.
So how do you do that in a way that respects them, that respects their legacy, right?
Yeah.
Ben's my
Yes.
legacy. Now I'm his legacy.
That's
So how
true.
does life respect that, respect him and the other people that I've lost as well? That's,
Yeah.
that's a choice we get to make.
Get to choose that. Right. How do you cope with letting go of those dreams and visions that you had for his life? And, I and in the world of baby loss too, it's like
Yeah.
you have these dreams and visions of what the future is going to look like. How do you cope with that?
It's so interesting as parents. I think we have those dreams and visions from like the second we find out we're pregnant, right?
Mm,
We've written the whole life story of how it's going to go. And of course, it never does. And there's bumps along the way and there's catastrophic loss along the way. And for me, what I've realized is I have to do it really consciously. So, how do I and it's really tangible things. Like I try and hold on to the really tangible things.
mhm.
And and we talk about them. So we've done a couple of trips now that we call revisit and reclaim. So trips to places we loved to go with him that we now need to make a decision. Like, is this a place we want to keep being able to go? Is this a place we just go to revisit and remember the amazing things we did there with him? Are we reclaiming this place and turning it into something a little bit different and doing different things than maybe we would have done with him, while also doing the things that he loved to do, which we learned to love to do because we loved him? So it is that, to me, it's a very conscious process, and it's a step-by-step thing that I think will continue to happen for the rest of my life, because there will continue to be things that in my version of my life story, he was supposed to be a part of,
Mm,
that he's now not going to be there for.
yeah.
So I suspect, and you can help me learn this, I suspect it's different than it would be with the loss, with a stillbirth or with the loss of a very young infant, because Ben was 22. So that sense that, of course, he was going to be at his sister's wedding when it happened someday. Well, of course he was. So my daughter and I have talked about that. Like, what do we do at your wedding whenever it happens?
Yeah.
That acknowledges the role he was supposed to play in that. And now he's not here to do. How do we do that when big things happen? When we go to like the kind of concert we would have gone to with him, or, whatever it is,
Mm,
how do we kind of do that really purposefully? And I think if you're really conscious and aware and you do it purposefully, for us, that's been kind of the magic ticket,
mhm.
because there's no pretending. I almost instantly lost my capacity to pretend pretty much anything. And that whole sense of like, I'm going to come and perform, good, whatever
Yeah.
we all are trained to perform. I couldn't do any of that. So I had to become really purposeful. And that sort of contemplativeness has been really helpful, because then we're not
Mhm.
going into things pretending that they're not going to be hard. Like we have a trip actually upcoming in a few weeks that we're going to do, which is the last of our 2020, trip credits that we have to do. And it's a trip we were supposed to do with Ben. And we're doing it a little bit different way. And we're actually going to be on our trip for his birthday. And so on the day that is his birthday, we're going to go do a champagne tasting, because Ben loved champagne. So that's a way for us to have him there on that trip, on that day. He's not here physically with us, but,
Yeah.
he's part of our lives. And so you do have to let it go and kind of refigure it at the same time, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
it's that holding paradox. I remember saying to my daughter in the very early days, we are going to become experts at holding paradox, because you have to. Everything all of a sudden is a both and. It's impossible, and I have to do it anyway.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Everything becomes a both and. So that's been our approach. Like, how do we see it coming as best we can? And you can't always, right? None of us are perfect. We're all doing this imperfectly. But some things you can predict, you can see them coming. How do we make a plan? How do we allow that plan to be super fluid?
Yeah.
Because we can need to be responsive to how we feel on the day or in the moment. And that allows us to build our life with him. We're carrying that
Mhm.
loss, we're carrying him with us. I don't want to leave him behind. And I think that's where grievers get stuck, right? If we were buying into that paradigm of, getting through it and moving on, all of that languaging implies that you're leaving something
So oh,
behind.
that's good.
We don't
Yeah.
want to leave our person behind.
No.
Why would we? We don't want to. We want to carry them with us. So how do we upend that paradigm and go, yeah, and I'm not moving on and I'm not getting through it because why would I? Would I like to get through the days where all I can do is sob on the couch? 100%. I would like to get through those, but I'll be grieving him for the rest of my life. And I'm okay with that.
100%. Yeah. And it right, it will. And it evolves
Yeah.
and you can breathe a little bit easier as time goes on, but it's still there. I think the only difference with maybe an older child experience versus a stillbirth or young infant death is you have to guess what their personality would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't get the chance to experience their personality, to know their likes and their wants and the things that they enjoy.
Mhm.
So we get to create that for them and memorialize them in the ways that we assume they would enjoy things, but
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and I have a big thing too about comparing grief. I don't think there is such a thing.
No.
I mean, someone might say, "Well, yeah, but she got to have her child for 22 years." Okay, but the end result is still, living the life your future without him is just as devastating.
Yeah.
Even though you did get a little extra time with him than a
Yeah.
baby loss mom.
Yeah. And I think it does all of us a disservice, this whole weird comparison of grief that we have. Like, and I have people say to me all the time, oh, but it doesn't compare to what you went through. I'm like, no, it doesn't. And why should it? And who cares? Like, it's not a contest. We all grieve. We all lose people. We all lose all kinds of things in our lives. And it all counts. It all matters. And I think anytime we're trying to elevate one over another, or, that implies that one is less than, well, that's not a helpful system of thinking for anybody.
I
It just doesn't.
definitely see it in pregnancy loss. Well, but you were only 8 weeks along and well,
Yes.
I was 16 weeks along, so that's way worse than the 8 week, and I mean, there is no worse. There's
Yeah.
no worse. At the end of the day, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
None
Well,
of us
and it's
get
interesting.
to raise our baby.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about it the other day because I was sort of preparing what I might say to your audience. And I had a miscarriage before my daughter was born.
Mhm.
And I still think of that.
Mhm.
She's now 28. So it would have been 30 years ago, probably. Yeah. 30 years ago. And I still think, I'm like, I wonder what that little brilliant, you know, person would have been,
Yeah.
but I'll never know. And so
And
I
for
think it is
me
a different, the moving on and the letting go of those dreams is different because I do get to go do things I knew Ben would have loved.
mm,
At 22, he'll be forever 22.
right.
So whether he would have still wanted to do them now that he would have been 25, I don't know, but he's doing it with us anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sense of, and I had a colleague who had his daughter died when she was, I say maybe 3 weeks old, very tiny, very sick, in the NICU her entire life. And one of the things that they did that I thought was so beautiful is he said they'd always had a dream of going they have a son as well, and going with their two kids to Hawaii. So they did the family trip anyway, a while after she had died. So they weren't right in that acute phase, but they were still in the early phase for sure, those early days, which for me was 2 years. That's the other thing no one tells you. Early days, it's a long time. And they went and did the trip anyway. And they took some of her ashes with them. And had a scattering. And I thought, good for you. Like, you have to, the parts of that life that you dreamed of sharing and you dreamed of, learning something from together, like it still makes sense to me to go do those things. Like,
Yeah.
go do them anyway. No, it's not going to be what you dreamed. It's not going to be what you thought, but it's still worth doing.
It's great advice. Mm. It is still worth doing and
Yeah.
making the memories
Yeah.
because
That's
of them,
a
for
huge
them.
thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The dream's only for them. And I think that's where we get kind of lost is,
yeah.
the dream I had about what our life was going to be like, because Ben was going to be there. That was a dream for me too. It wasn't just a dream for him. So I hold that dream. Like, I dreamed that we would travel all kinds of amazing places and we would do amazing things. And there's no reason I should give that up because he's not with us to experience it here.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
holding those dreams that you had that were also for you and
It
living those dreams in honor of and carrying that loss with you.
I think that's so important. Yes, that you realize that it is in honor of them and not in punishment of
Yeah.
you. Sometimes I think we wanna punish ourselves when we have a loss, and so it's easy. Again, it comes back to choosing.
Yeah. And there's a really great saying that helps, I think, especially with child loss, because so many parents get tangled in guilt and feeling like they could have done something, should have done something, even if you were perfect, which none of us are. But, we've all done the best we knew how and the best we could. And it's, I heard Brene Brown say it the other day, she calls it the 3 C's. And I've heard other people say it too, which is you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and we couldn't cure it.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, that is so us, isn't it?
Right. And the
Yes.
first time I heard that, I was like, hold on.
Yeah,
I,
does she
no,
mean it for me? Like, she talking directly to me?
Like,
Oh,
500 of us on this Zoom call, right? The first person I heard, David Kessler, I did my
I
grief
love
education. I'm doing
yeah,
another grief and trauma course with him right now. And I heard him say it and I was like, he's speaking just to me.
yeah.
Right. But isn't that powerful? You didn't
So
cause it.
amazing.
You couldn't control it and we couldn't cure it.
Yeah,
So that releases all of that sense that somehow this is our fault and somehow we should have done something different or known better or whatever story we're all entangled in that really just serves to keep us stuck.
yeah,
If release all of that, feel it. I'm all about feeling all the emotions. They're big and they're
have
and
to.
you just have to face it and walk with it. I heard a description of grief the other day that was so perfect, which was it's the uninvited visitor no one ever wanted and is here to stay.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, true.
Like,
Yeah,
I just, gonna do this dance with this uninvited guest for how
yeah,
long? Right. But if we can release that sense that somehow it was our fault, which I think with child loss at whatever stage, whether it's a miscarriage or, stillbirth, infant loss, 22-year-old adult loss, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. There is that sense that somehow, as the parent, we were supposed to be able to keep them safe.
yeah. It was our job.
And yeah, it's really not. And even if we did that job perfectly, it doesn't always work out.
It's so true. Yes. Oh, so many good things. Well, Suzanne, I'm just so in awe of you that you
Oh,
are
thank
here
you.
just 3 years after, and you're able to bring your experience and share it and bring Ben's memory and all of the amazing things that you've learned since then to help other people grieve in a better way. I don't know if that's a real thing, but grieve in
I
a
mean,
better way, in a
healthier, I think.
healthier way, and especially help other people that help a grieving person in a healthier way. That's so
Yeah.
important too, is the people that are helping us and supporting us through this to have them be equipped with what they need.
Yeah.
And so I love that you are able and willing to do this and share it
Oh,
with so many. And I know it's going to make a huge, huge difference. So is there
thanks.
one thing that we haven't talked about that you love for my audience to know?
Gosh, I think the main thing I think that helped me is just that sense that I had to embrace it in a weird way. I had to allow the grief to be
Mm,
and to be okay with it, to be okay with the horror and the devastation and all the emotions all the time. I just had to, I just had to accept it all and allow it all to be. And for me, that's been the way to stay sane, frankly.
yeah.
To be honest, that's the only way that I've managed to get through those survival days and get to being able to kind of figure out what on earth is possibly next. And, there's not a lot of spaces where we feel allowed to do that and a lot of spaces where we feel safe to do that. So if you have one person, two people, I had three or four, you know, do that there. Find a place it's safe for it to all be big and unwieldy and unmanageable and just plain ridiculous and terrible, and really let it be
Mm,
and let yourself feel it all and let it wash over. I promise it's not. I think we get scared that if we face it to that degree and if we allow it into that degree, we'll get stuck there.
yes.
And in reality, it's actually the only way to move.
To get through it. Yes.
It's the
You are
only
right.
way to start to integrate it. It's the only way to start to make sense of it. It's the only way. And if we push it aside, it's going to come back to get us.
You hit the nail on the head. Like, I think if people think that that it's gonna be surrendering to grief, and
Yeah.
that's it. If I surrender to this grief, then it's gonna have me forever, and I'm never gonna get back out of it. But just being with it and being in it and keeping your circle small for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah. It's okay that it's small. It's okay.
That's good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. And where can people find you and learn more about you and how you can help?
Yeah. So the best place to find me is on my website, which is a livedexperience.com.
Okay.
That's the best place. You can link there to all my social media places. My blog posts are there. So right from the early days when I started writing about how awful it is,
Mm,
you may find some comfort there and just
yeah.
really honest writing. And my workshop schedule is there and you can email me and join the newsletter. Everything you need is there.
All the things are on the website.
All the
Perfect.
things. Yeah. One
Well,
stop shop.
I will definitely link that in the show notes.
Thank
So
you.
that will be there for everyone to find you and see what you're up to. So thank you so much, Suzanne. I so appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation. It's really so important.
Yes, it is.